I don't remember deciding to run. My body moved before my mind did. I turned and lunged up the porch steps, fumbling with my keys, nearly dropping them twice before I got the door open. The hinges slammed against the interior wall as I stumbled inside and shoved it shut behind. Clicked. Then the deadbolt, then the chain. As if any of that would matter. I pressed my back against the door, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the thin line of darkness beneath the frame. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No scratching, no impact, no attempt to force entry. The silence was worse than noise. I forced myself to move toward the front window, slowly, carefully. Every board in the house seemed to creak louder than usual. I stopped beside the curtain and peeled it back just a fraction of an inch. The yard was empty. The shed door hung open. The tree line stood still. No glowing eyes, no towering silhouettes, nothing. I let the curtain fall back into place. Maybe they had gone. Maybe the doorway had been a warning. Maybe. A heavy impact slammed into the side of the house, not the front door, the side wall near the kitchen. The entire frame shuddered violently. The glass rattled off the counter and shattered on the floor. Another hit followed, lower this time, closer to the ground. Something was testing the structure, circling. I stepped back instinctively as a shadow slid across the living room window, large, distorted by a curtain, but unmistakably upright. It paused, then moved on. The boards along the exterior groaned under shifting weight. They weren't trying to break in. They were mapping it, learning it. The sound moved toward the back of the house, toward the sliding door that opened to the small deck. I rushed to the hallway and flicked off every interior light. Darkness swallowed the rooms instantly. If they were looking in, I didn't want to give them silhouettes. The back of the house felt quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard the deck creak, one step, then another, slow, measured. The sliding glass door trembled faintly as something leaned against it from the outside. The blinds went inward, slightly under pressure. I stood frozen halfway down the hallway, unable to look directly but unable to look away. The pressure increased. The glass groaned softly. A breath fogged the outside pane, then another. Two distinct patches of condensation formed at different heights, one slightly taller than the other. They were standing upright, right against the door. The taller shape shifted and a claw traced slowly down the glass, leaving a faint, squealing line as it dragged across the surface, not striking, just feeling. The smaller one's head tilted. I could see the silhouette through the blinds, that same unnatural angle. They weren't frantic, they weren't enraged, they were patient. The larger one leaned closer, the blinds bent further, and through the narrow gaps between slats I saw it clearly. Amber eyes, just inches from the glass, studying the inside of my home, studying me. I took a slow step backward. The floorboard creaked beneath my weight. The creature's head snapped slightly toward the sound. It heard that. It knew exactly where I was now. The glass vibrated again under its weight, and then, from the woods behind the house came a deep, resonant howl, closer than before, much closer. The two at the door went still instantly. The larger one lifted its head. The smaller one stepped back slightly from the glass. Another howl followed, lower, commanding. The taller silhouette straightened fully, rising to its maximum height, even though through the blinds I could see how high its head reached, higher than the door frame. It let out a low vibration in response, not as loud as the one from the woods, submissive. The pressure against the glass eased. The fog slowly faded. The deck boards creaked again as weight lifted and shifted away. One step, two, three, then silence. I didn't move for a long time. Minutes passed, maybe longer. The house stood still. The yard remained dark. And slowly, cautiously, I stepped toward the sliding door and parted the blinds just slightly. The deck was empty. The yard empty. The shed door now closed. The tree line unmoving. But deep within the woods, I could feel it. Not hear it. Not see it. Feel it. They weren't gone. They had been called back, and whatever had called them was bigger. Morning didn't bring relief, it brought evidence. I don't remember sleeping. At some point, the sky shifted from black to gray, and I was still sitting on the hallway floor with my back against the wall, staring at the sliding glass door. When the first thin light of dawn slipped through the blinds, everything looked smaller, less threatening, ridiculous even. I almost convinced myself it had been some kind of stress-included hallucination until I stepped outside. The air was cold but calm, no dramatic atmosphere, no fog rolling across the yard, just daylight, normal, honest daylight. I walked onto the deck first. 4 deep gouges cut across the wood near the door, not surface scratches, splits, each one spaced evenly apart, claw marks longer than my hand. I crouched and ran my fingers along one of them. Fresh splinters flaked away under light pressure. Not imagined, not old damage, fresh. My stomach tightened. I stepped down into the yard. The grass was flattened in wide arcs circling the house, not random patches, deliberate paths like something had paced the perimeter over and over through the night. Near the tree line, the soil was churned up, and there they were, tracks, large, canine-shaped impressions pressed deep into the earth, but wrong. The stride between them was too long, and halfway along the pattern the prints shifted. The hind paws deepened, the front prints disappeared, then reappeared farther ahead. It had stood up, walked, then dropped back down again. I followed the line of tracks toward the shed. The door, which had been wide open the night before, now hung shut, but the wood around the latch was cracked inward, forced closed from the outside. Inside the shed, everything had been disturbed. The moor tipped slightly, tool hooks bent, and across the dirt floor were more tracks, multiple sets, at least 3, maybe 4. The metallic scent lingered faintly in the air. I stepped back outside and turned slowly toward the woods. In daylight, they didn't look mysterious, just trees, ordinary trunks, tangled underbrush, nothing supernatural about them. But at the very edge, where the yard ended and shadow began, something caught the light. I walked closer. A strip of fabric snagged on a low branch, dark, weathered. I recognized it instantly. It was from the jacket I'd been wearing the night before. A thin tear I hadn't noticed at the time must have caught when the larger one slid down my windshield. They hadn't just followed, they had touched, marked. And then I saw something else, carved into the bark of the tree beside the torn fabric, not deep, but deliberate. 4 vertical slashes, parallel, too evenly spaced to be accidental. Territory marking, claiming. My property line wasn't a boundary to them, it was an extension, a corridor, just like Bray Road. I felt exposed, standing there in daylight, like something might still be watching from deeper inside the woods, and then I noticed the birds. There weren't any. No morning chirping, no movement between branches. The forest was silent. The silence stretched long enough that my pulse began rising again, not from what I saw, from what I didn't. Then, faintly, very faintly, I heard it. Not a howl, not a growl, a low, rhythmic vibration, farther back in the woods, steady, measured, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to any single body. I stepped back toward the house slowly, eyes fixed on the trees. The vibration the moment I reached the open yard, if it had followed me just to the edge, watching, calculating, waiting. And standing there in full daylight, staring into ordinary Wisconsin trees, I realized something that unsettled me more than the night had. They weren't creatures that haunted darkness, they used it, but they didn't need it. And whatever had called them back was still out there, wide awake. I didn't call the police. I don't know why. Maybe because I already knew what the report would sound like out loud. Large dogs, coyotes, stress, overactive imagination. Instead, I drove back toward Bray Road in daylight. The road looked smaller than it had the night before, narrow, ordinary, a strip of cracked asphalt cutting between open fields and tired fence lines. Nothing about it suggested hierarchy or corridors or something that stood taller than a doorframe. But as I slowed near the stretch where they had blocked me, I saw it. Long skid marks, mine. Dark arcs burned into the pavement from when I'd slammed the brakes. And beside them, deep gouges in the asphalt. Not from trees. Four parallel scratches cutting across the road surface as if something would wade and dug in hard and fast. I stepped out of the truck. The morning sun hit the pavement at a low angle, making every imperfection stand out in the sharp relief. There were prints here too, faint, hard to see on asphalt, but visible in the dust that had settled along the edges. Large canine shapes, then partial impressions that looked almost like elongated hands. I crouched beside one, 5 indentations, claw tips visible at the ends. I stood up slowly. You see it too, the voice came from behind me. I turned sharply. An older man stood near the fence line across the road, late 60s, maybe older, heavy jacket despite the mild temperature. His posture wasn't surprised. It was resigned. You're looking at the marks? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. He crossed the road without waiting for permission and stopped a few feet away from me, staring down at the gouges like he'd seen them before. Been happening for years, he said quietly. People just don't talk about it much. You've seen them? I asked. He glanced at me, not confused, not skeptical, just measuring. Depends what you mean by them. I didn't push, I didn't describe, I just waited. He nodded once toward the fields. They move through here, always have, farms lose, livestock, dogs won't go outside at night. Sometimes folks see something cross the road. Something upright, I said before I could stop myself. His eyes shifted back to me sharply. Then he nodded again. Not all the time, he said, but enough. Why doesn't anyone report it? He gave a short, humorless breath. To who? He gestured vaguely around us. You think someone's gonna send a task force for something that doesn't leave a body behind? I swallowed. They followed me home, I said. He didn't react with disbelief. That bothered me more than laughter would have. Did they break in? He asked. No. He nodded slowly. They don't usually. Usually. The word hung between us. What do they want? I asked. He looked out toward the distant tree line where the land dipped slightly before rising again into thicker woods. They're not hunting like wolves, he said. They're not wandering like coyotes. He paused. It's more like they're managing something. Managing what? He didn't answer that. Instead, he bent down and ran his fingers along one of the deep scratches in the asphalt. A couple of years back, he said quietly, a reporter from Walworth County Week came out here, wrote about sightings. Folks laughed, said it was hysteria. He straightened up, but people kept seeing it. He looked at me again. You're not the first one they've followed. The air felt thinner. What happens to the others? I asked. He studied me for a long moment. Most move. That answer didn't feel like comfort, and the ones who don't, he didn't respond. A breeze moved across the fields, bending the dry grass in slow waves. For a split second, far down the road where it curved slightly out of sight, I thought I saw movement, tall, crossing from one side to the other, gone as quickly as it appeared. The older man noticed my stare. They don't like being watched too long in daylight, he said quietly. You believe they're real, I said. He held my gaze. I believe the land doesn't belong to us as much as we pretend it does. That wasn't an answer, but it was the most honest thing anyone had said about it so far. He started walking back toward his side of the road. If they came to your house, you're inside whatever line they're drawing. A chill crawled up my spine. What line? He stopped briefly, then almost reluctantly he said, territory is not always horizontal. And then he continued walking, leaving me standing alone on Bray Road in full daylight, wondering what vertical territory could possibly be. I didn't wait days to decide. I gave it one more night. That was my mistake. All afternoon I packed essentials, clothes, documents, a few tools, telling myself I'd drive to my cousin's place 2 countries over and think things through. I didn't say the real reason out loud. If I left before dark, maybe I could cross whatever invisible boundary they'd drawn. The house felt smaller as the sun lowered. Every shadow in the corners looked deeper than it should have. The gouges on the deck caught the dying light like open wounds. By sunset, I had the truck loaded, engine running, headlights on. I stepped back inside one last time to grab my phone charger from the kitchen counter. That's when the power went out. No flicker, no warning, just total black. The engine was still running outside, its hum faint through the walls, so it wasn't a grid failure, just my house. I moved toward the window and lifted the curtain slightly. Across the field, the Miller farmhouse lights were on, steady, bright. Only my property sat in darkness. A slow, deliberate pressure settled in my chest. They didn't need night, they could make it. I stepped back onto the porch. The truck's headlights cut across the yard in two twin beams, illuminating drifting dust and the lower trunks of the trees. Nothing stood there, but the woods looked thicker than usual. The spaces between branches seemed filled. I forced myself down the steps and into the driver's seat, slammed the door, locked it. I didn't look toward the shed. I put the truck in reverse. The tires spun briefly on gravel before gripping. As I backed toward the driveway's mouth, the headlight swept across the tree line and caught eyes. Not two, not four, more, scattered at different heights, some low to the ground, some level with the hood, one higher than the rest, blinking slowly. They didn't move into the light. They didn't charge. They just watched. I shifted into drive and hit the gas. The truck shot forward down the narrow lane toward the road. For a moment I thought I'd break through clean. Then the engine coughed. A violent shudder ran through the frame. The dashboard lights flickered. The radio cut to static. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The RPM spiked, but the speed didn't increase. Something heavy hit the truck bed from behind. The suspension dipped sharply. Then another impact on the passenger side. Metal screamed as claws dragged along the door panel. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. Bray Road was only yards away now. If I could just reach the asphalt. The truck died. Completely. Engine silent. Headlights out. Power gone. Momentum carried me a few more feet before the vehicle rolls to a stop at the edge of my driveway. Total darkness swallowed everything, except the eyes. They moved now, slowly emerging from the tree line. tall silhouettes forming against the faint starlight. One stepped directly in front of the truck, massive, broader than the others. It didn't hurry, didn't threaten. It simply stood there, occupying the only path forward. The air vibrated faintly with that deep, rhythmic pulse I'd heard in the woods, not from one direction, from all around. I reached for the ignition again. Nothing, no click, no turnover, dead. The driver's side mirror tilted slightly underweight as something climbed onto the side of the truck, claws hooked over the roof. The metal groaned. Another shape pressed behind the vehicle, cutting off any thought of running on foot. The largest one stepped closer to the hood, close enough that I could see its outline clearly against the sky. It lowered onto all fours briefly, then rose again, as if to remind me it could choose either form. Its head tilted slightly, studying me through the windshield, not angry, not hungry, assessing. Then something happened that chilled me deeper than any attack would have. It stepped aside, just one step, clearing a narrow path to Bray Road. The others followed suit, shifting position, opening a corridor through their ranks, an invitation or a test. The engine sputtered back to life on its own. Headlights flared on, emanating their forms in full, rippled in the beams. Amber eyes reflected bright and unblinking. None of them lunged. None of them retreated. They waited. The path was open. But I understood now. They weren't stopping me from leaving. They were watching to see if I would. And deep in my bones, I knew something with terrifying clarity. If I drove away tonight, I wouldn't be escaping. I'd be considering and crossing fully into whatever territory they were managing. And this house, this small piece of land, wasn't a prison. It was the edge. I pressed the gas, slowly, tentatively. The truck inched forward, gravel crunching under the tires, the amber eyes of the tallest one following every movement. The others spread along the yard and tree line, flanking the narrow corridor as though marking the edges of some invisible lane. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Every fiber of my body screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to run into the woods, anywhere but this straight path through their ranks. The truck rolled past the first one, its claws hovered just above the roof as it shifted its weight, muscles rippling under coarse fur. I didn't dare glance at the side mirror. Halfway down the yard, smaller ones crouched lower, still like shadows of the larger beast. Their amber eyes glimmered in the low light, fixed on me, calculating, measuring. The engine growled. My foot pressed harder. Then the first sound of the night returned, a low vibration, not a growl, not a roar, but a rhythm pulsing from the woods, from deep behind the tree line. It resonated through the truck floor, up my legs, straight into my chest. The largest one's head lifted slightly, ears twitching. It exhaled, a sound that was both warning and acknowledgement. The smaller ones mirrored it, then all of them shifted. Step by step, they moved away from the truck, guiding it, herding it, marking the space I was allowed. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. As I hit the asphalt of Bray Road, the corridor vanished. The field returned to normal. The trees stood ordinary, silent, lifeless in daylight. Nothing followed, nothing ran, nothing leapt. I breathed. Finally, the road stretched before me like any other rural Wisconsin lane. But the memory of the eyes stayed. The rhythm pulsing under the night sky, the way the larger one had measured me, had watched me, had allowed me passage. I drove faster than I'd ever dared. I didn't slow until I was past the stretch where the first encounter began, past the fields, past the corners where the road bent sharply. Only when the first signs of the town lights appeared did I feel my body begin to unquiet. But even then, I knew, deep down in that hollow place inside my chest, Bray Road wasn't the end. It was the beginning. They didn't just inhabit the darkness, they managed it. And now, in some way, I was part of their map. The days that followed offered no relief. I tried to convince myself it had been a one-time encounter, a strange, terrifying anomaly. I told neighbors I'd seen something unusual on Bray Road, but no one pressed. The older man I had spoken to vanished after that morning, leaving only the words that echoed in my mind. Territory is not always horizontal. I drove past that stretch of road in daylight, trying to rationalize what I had seen. The asphalt was cracked, gravel shifted, nothing seemed out of place, yet I couldn't shake the memory of those amber eyes or the way the tallest one had made me. Then came the first sign that the beast wasn't bound to darkness, wasn't limited to fields, woods, or road. It was a Friday evening. I was back at the truck, parked in front of my house. The headlights cut across the yard in a pale orange wash, the same deck gouges glinting faintly in the light. I felt watched, though the air was still and the night quiet. A shadow moved near the shed, low, careful. The faint sound of claws against wood reached me. I froze, and then I heard it. Not one howl, not two, but a series of them overlapping, layered from the woods, the edge of the yard, beyond the trees, and yet everywhere, surrounding. I didn't sleep outside. I couldn't. I didn't step outside. The larger one emerged first, stepping into the faint glow of my driveway, not running, not charging, walking, deliberate, measured. The smaller ones followed, spread across the yard like sentinels. They didn't approach aggressively. They didn't make a sound. And I understood immediately. They weren't hunting. They were watching, managing, claiming. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the trees felt amplified. The low, rhythmic vibration returned, faint at first, then stronger, coursing through the floors, the walls, even the air I breathed. My body trembled from it. And I noticed something worse. The deck, the gouges, the yard itself. It wasn't just my property anymore. It had become part of their map. Every shadow, every space, every inch of earth around me was under scrutiny. Their territory extended vertically, horizontally, outward, inward, and no matter where I turned, what I did, the understanding sank in. Bray Road was no longer just a road. It was a corridor, and I was part of the pathway. There would be no escaping this, no running, only waiting for what came next. Night fell again, but it was different this time. The shadows didn't just stretch across the yard. They seemed to pulse, bending and twisting as though alive. I stayed near the front window, unable to leave the house, unable to look away from the edges of my property. The rhythm returned, low, constant, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine, vibrating through the floor, the walls, even the air itself. I heard movement in the yard before I saw it. Claws scraping the deck, leaves crunching under weight, something massive shifting just beyond the tree line, and then, slowly, one by one, silhouettes appeared, tall, broad, moving with an almost mechanical precision. Amber eyes glowing faintly, reflecting what little light there was. I realized, with a chill that froze my blood, that they weren't hunting tonight. They weren't angry, they weren't even curious. They were marking, surveying, asserting. The largest one stepped forward first, Its gaze met mine through the window, not hostile, not hungry, calculating, judging. I felt as if it could see every decision I had ever made, every misstep, every heartbeat of fear, and weigh them. Then the others began to move, not at random, but systematically. They walked the perimeter, brushed past the edges of the yard, returned to the positions along the tree line, forming a living boundary. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to disappear, to shrink, but I knew the truth. The beast didn't need darkness to dominate. It needed presence, and mine had been noted, cataloged, incorporated into its world. Hours passed, minutes blurred, time felt meaningless. Every creak, every distant thump, every low vibration reminded me that this was no temporary encounter. This was ongoing. By the faint light of the moon, I saw the largest silhouette move one last time. From the edge of the yard to the far tree line, it stopped, glanced back, and for a single heartbeat, I felt it acknowledged me. A silent, chilling understanding. You belong here now, within the scope of our territory. Always observed, always measured. Then it disappeared into the woods. The smaller ones followed, slipping into shadows until the yard was once again empty, but the weight of their presence remained. The air carried it, the earth remembered it. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't try. I sat in silence, listening for the low, pulsing rhythm in the dark, knowing it was there, somewhere beyond sight, waiting, always waiting. And I understood, finally, that the Beast of Bray Road wasn't just a creature of the night. It wasn't just a legend. It was a force, a manager of boundaries I could no longer escape. And in this quiet terror, one truth settled in my chest with the certainty of a hammer blow. I would never be free, not fully, not ever.